I actually had a flight last month where I had a guy puke all over me.
Oh,
That's a
no.
first. That was a first.
Never
That
had
was straight up a first. And it was like the weirdest thing too, because like younger guy
Yeah.
sits down, doesn't say a word, puts his headphones on, just literally passes out. Not even thinking anything of it. I'm just sitting there, bumping away on my laptop. I can kind of soon start to wake up a little bit, and you kind of look this way, and then look this way, and just. I was like, what the f just happened? Did you seriously just vomit in my lap? Like,
for freshly brewed discussion on automotive sales and marketing, this is Coffee with Jason. The Coffee with Jason podcast is sponsored by Closer's Coffee. For that full-bodied, rich, sweet flavor with a bright acidity, drink Closer's Coffee, stay caffeinated, and keep on closing. Find out more at closerscoffee.ca.
Hey, what's going on, Podcast Nation? It is Jason Harris here with Digital Dealership Solutions. Hey, thanks for joining me on another episode of Coffee with Jason. Today, I have a very special guest all the way from the great state of Wisconsin. All right. my guest today is Jay. Jay, for everyone out there that's listening and watching, if you could give us that quick origin story that is Jay, that would be a great place for us to get started.
Yeah, well, first off, thanks for having me, Jason. I am a big fan of your work and everything that you do, not only for yourself, but for the industry in general. I think it's a really, really cool thing. As far as my background and what I guess what made me into what I am today is I started off, my dad owned an independent repair shop in a really small town in Wisconsin, actually still does. Is in his 26th year of business. I'm not involved with the day-to-day.
That's cool.
Yeah, it is. I'm not involved with the day-to-day, but that's really how things started. He started off with essentially a $2,000 loan from my grandma to get started, and he was working a lot of hours, right? Because you're just trying to pay the bills. So he'd work these 18-hour days working on cars, trying to answer the phone at the same time. Didn't have a secretary, didn't have anything. So what would happen is, during the summers and after school, I would end up answering the phone for him. I would schedule basic maintenance for him. So if it was oil changes or tire rotations, whatever it was, I was scheduling them. In that, back then we were scheduling LOFs, right? The leave oil filters. And
Yep.
so I'd just put in LOF and know that it took this much time to do it. And so that really kind of got me into the business to start with, right? And I've always, I think that's what really ingrained that love for the car business into me. And so as we kept going, I always had the dream of I wanted to work in the shop, right? Like, so my dad kept growing, and by the time I was probably 14 or 15, I was out working in the shop and doing simple tire replacements and oil changes and the things that I was scheduling before I started doing. And then, as I was doing that, learning and going to an apprenticeship program at the local community college in high school. And so went off to tech school, came back to work for him. And I did that for about a year. And I was an absolute disaster. I was not good at it. I was about 19 or 20 years old, an absolute immature punk that thought maybe he knew everything, and at the same time, in the back of my head always was like, I'm just not very good at this, right? And I don't have a passion like some of these other guys do to fix something. I think it has something to do with my attention span, most likely. But so essentially the industry kind of kicked me out after that. I was looking for a job, and I went up to the Madison, Wisconsin area and looked for anything, right? Like, at that point, I'm like, what can I do? I went to tech school to work on cars, and I'm not good at that. So what do I do? And luckily enough, I was hired by a company called Diesel Injection Service, which is now Diesel Forward, to do customer service for them. And in the ad, it basically said you can talk to people about diesel parts and on the phone. And I'm like, hey, I like to talk, and I like cars. I just didn't like working them, right? So then I ended up being pretty good at that. I think it took a while, but then as you start to gain confidence and start to really get don't know, a feel for what you're doing. Confidence was the big thing, honestly. And once I got confidence in it, parlayed that into having an opportunity across the road at a semi-trailer dealership. So I went over there, started out as a sales coordinator, and then did some business development for a mobile storage business that they did. And it was not a fit compared to my entire past prior, but it was really, really good in that I had a good mentor there that really taught me the importance of reading and studying and really being good at your craft. So was there for a couple of years, was lucky enough to then get into Bobcat. Worked for Bobcat Company for about 6 years and as a district service manager. So I was kind of a rep from the manufacturer to about 40 dealerships roughly. And so that was really cool because you got some really, really cool training opportunities that you might not have gotten otherwhere, where they put a lot of training into you and really you get to know anything from diagnostic.
That really giving you just a whole nother approach to the operations. What was going on, and
it really starts to introduce you to the business side of what we do, right? And so from there, I got recruited by one of the dealerships that I was a rep for to come and run their parts and service department. So I ran the aftermarket for a 7-store John Deere and Bobcat dealership. So I had all of those kind of departments underneath me. So that kind of took my, I guess, knowledge level to the next step in terms of operations, understanding financial statements, understanding work in process, and trying to move money through a service department or move money through a parts department at a pretty large scale. I mean, I think I was 30 years old when I took that job. And you walk in and you've got all these older guys that have been there for a long time, and they're like, who's this punk coming in here and trying to tell us what to do? So you have to earn respect. You have to learn really, really fast, and it was a great experience. But in the back of my mind, I always had kind of that entrepreneurial side where I knew I wanted to do something different. I'd actually bought the domain finderwrench.com back in, I think, 2006 or so.
Oh, so this is something that's been on your mind for a while then.
Yeah. And the funny part is the name Find a Wrench actually came from my dad would complain when I was a kid that I can't find a damn wrench anywhere. And so that always stuck in my head that it was hard to find techs back then. And then it just never got easier.
You know what? That's a really good point. You know, we say that all the time. I mean, I can't tell you how long I've been in this industry, and I've heard the exact same thing from the service department. It's just, I can't find a good tech. I can't find a good tech. But it hasn't changed. It's always been that case, right? But then, like, what do you really define as a good tech?
Right.
You know, has anybody actually ever taken the time to do that, right?
Yeah. And I think that it varies a lot, right? And it varies in what an operation wants. It's easy to say, hey, I need an A-level diagnostic tech that can solve any problem, but I don't want to.
But who doesn't want that? Well, yeah, exactly, right?
Yeah. And we still have that problem. And it truly is understanding what you need in that shop. And do you truly need an A-level tech, or maybe you've got an A-level tech that you need to take some of the load off of that person, or it really is trying to understand what it is that you need and how you're going to get them for like kind of a long haul, right? Because it's not easy to find these guys.
See, I love looking at this, and then I go back to the analogy of baseball so much, right?
Yeah, love baseball.
It's like because it's our team, but it's like we only have so many dollars to put that team together, right?
Yeah.
You're not going to be able to afford A-level techs.
It's a great analogy.
Like all of them. Like it's not. You're not going to be able to, right?
Nor do you want that.
Nor do you want that either, right? Talk about. Yeah, I've actually seen a couple departments that made that mistake.
Yeah, you still need some guys to do the dirty work too, right? Like you need people that are willing to do some of the things that maybe an A-level tech isn't willing to do. Right?
Yeah, so it's called the lineup. So I see this as where the first part of breakdown or failure when creating out that team usually ends up happening is that there's not really a true understanding of how they create the lineup.
Yeah.
It's like they're either too top heavy or too bottom heavy, and there's just there doesn't ever really kind of seem a balance. When you run into a dealership like that, and obviously we want to help them as much as we can, what advice would you normally give to a dealership that's, looking or has an opportunity to kind of rebuild the team or to sort of identify, where they are in their lineup?
Yeah. Well, it sounds really cliche because I think everybody says it now, but to proactively recruit and really have a strategy or plan in place so that you're not reactive in hiring. And I think I see it so much. I'm sure you see it with a lot of the dealerships you work with. Is it's really easy to get stuck in your day to day and kind of in the mud, and forget about a plan. Even if you put together a plan, it's easy to forget about it. But then it truly is. That's where we see the really like the bad hires and the non-fits happen, is because somebody has to hire somebody just to get a body to get the work out the door, and they don't hire for culture at that point. They don't hire for they honestly don't hire for skill set a lot of times at that point. They're trying to just get somebody in the door that can do anything, and that's a big piece of what we try to work with our clients on is truly trying to get some level of proactive approach to recruiting and even retainment, right? You've got to understand the people in your dealership at that time are very, very important to you. And I think, we put too much weight on thinking that a tech is going to stay with you for their lifetime. I think the average career or the average stay.
But we also spend enough time even deciding what the tech, like we don't create a clear path for techs to evolve.
Oh no,
we don't. I mean, I see guys back here that are 15 years into it.
Yeah,
they're doing the same shit they're doing. All right.
Yeah.
When they started 15 years ago,
which is not good for anybody.
Which is not good for anybody. No. Surprisingly, they seem to be okay with it. But that's very few selective individuals that can do that.
Yeah.
I mean, look, we're not holding on to people because we're not also developing out who they are as people.
Right. And I couldn't agree more. And even taking the time is like, if you do have a plan, part of that plan should be to actually take an interest in them personally, right? And not just treat them as a number back in the shop, but hey, what are your goals and aspirations moving forward? Because most of them probably do. And there might be a couple that are like, hey, you know what? I'm good right now. I like doing what I'm doing, and I just want to keep doing it. There are people that do that, but you at least need to know that as a manager, right? You need to understand where people, what people want.
100%.
And it's a hard thing to do because it's hard to get out of people.
Is it a hard thing to do, or is it we're just not willing to take the time to do it?
Both. I think there's.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So one example I've got of sometimes it's just a hard thing to do is I've blatantly asked techs that have worked for me, hey, what are your goals and aspirations moving forward? And they'll say, I'm good with where I'm at. I'm happy. And then like 3 months later, they'll leave. And I'm like, what happened? We literally just talked and you said, hey, this is good. I'm happy with where I'm at. And then they'll say, well, I didn't think there was any opportunity for growth here. And you're like, oh my goodness, I literally wanted to work with you to get you to where you want to go. But there's times where, and I've noticed this with techs specifically, is that they might even be shy to tell you that they have goals and aspirations outside of what they're doing right now.
Well, I agree with you. I've sat down with a lot and been the exact same thing. And that's why I always find it a little easier to focus on the personal development portion, and what direction they want to go personally than necessarily than professionally, right?
Yeah.
So, it's like, look, we all know what the tech does.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And we know why they do it. They're doing it to make money, but what for? Right. I don't think we spend enough time to find out that. Look, is the tech, because they're trying to provide, for the college tuition for the daughter? Is it, because they want to move out of mom and dad's house?
Right.
Is it because, that they want to take that next step in their life? What is it? What is their financial goal and objective?
Yeah.
All right. And then does the financial goal and objective match what their professional goal and objective is? So I feel like if we start there first, what their financial goal and objectives are. Yeah. Then when we start talking to them about their professional goal and objectives, saying, whoa, hold on a second. Um,
Yeah.
Instead, you want to be financially up here, but you're telling me that you're okay with consistently staying right here all the time.
Yeah.
That don't quite match.
It doesn't match. And I think the other piece to that is understanding how much money actually motivates them, right? Because it's easy on the sales side to say, anybody that we add from a sales perspective here at Find a Wrench, we want them to be motivated by money, right? Because and it's the same in a dealership. If you have a salesperson that's not motivated by money, they're probably not going to be the greatest salesperson in the world, right?
Yep.
But as a technician, sometimes they put their blinders on and they want to make enough to cover everything they've got at home, but they just want to work on this one thing that's in front of them and fix that. And so I will say there's some level to where even if they say they're not motivated by money, they probably are motivated by money.
Look, we all are. Look, we work for it. Like we work for it. There's now maybe it's not necessarily the actual physical paper form of it, right, but it's what that money brings to that individual.
You nailed it. If it's to buy a fishing boat, like that's
sure.
That's their motivation.
Well, it could be because that represents freedom for them. I don't have any beef with that. I got no beef with that at all. I got a technician that comes to me and goes, Jay, I want to work, and I want to put in this time because I want my fishing boat. Yeah. And to them, if that's what represents this form of freedom, this ability to decompress and relax, and then let's make that their financial goal.
Yeah, absolutely. But the fact you hit on something key right there. I think the fact that you even asked them in the first place is a big deal, right? Mm-hmm. Like because it shows that you care enough to even know that, and even it gives you some commonality in terms of when you're walking the shop as a manager. And you go out and you say, hey, how we doing? How we working towards that boat? Or
I want a picture of that damn boat right above this box.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We can take down the pinup girls, and let's put a picture of the boat right there, right? Yeah. And let everybody see. The other cool thing is that what I love about Golden Objectives is that there's knowledge, there's power in knowledge, right?
Oh, for sure.
As a manager, and I think this is where I actually feel that to a certain degree, not for all managers, but for some managers, that there's actually fear in wanting to know that information.
Oh my goodness.
Because once you know, the fact now holds a level of you accountable. Like you're actually accountable now for that knowledge.
Yeah.
Like you have a team member that's working for you, coming in, punching in the morning, punching in at the night, and you know what they're trying to achieve, and you're not assisting. That's going to physically and mentally wear someone down. So I can see why a lot of service managers don't necessarily go that direction. They don't want to take the time to know their team that well. It's easier to look. I know this sounds bad. There's a simplicity in just looking at them as a number.
Oh my goodness, yes. You're absolutely right. I think that kind of leads into something else, which I think is super, super important, is gaining the trust of those guys in the shop, right? Mm-hmm. Because there's so much kind of distrust between the front office and the back shop they're trying to screw me. And in some levels, I don't blame them with some of these flat rate systems. Like
some shit I've seen, yeah.
And we recruit for every brand. We recruit, it doesn't matter. I'm not biased to anybody, but when you look at it and you look at the pay plan and you can see that's causing distrust. And if you get maybe a service advisor or service manager that's not that's working against them, and even if they're not, if the perception is that they're working against them, and it could just be a difference in personalities, there's that level of trust just isn't there that's needed to kind of take that service department to the next level and take that individual to the next level.
Well, let's talk about that. Let's go a little more into it, because you kind of mentioned a little bit earlier too, right? Is culture, right? Yeah. Nobody's ever taken the time to actually identify what they would like their culture to be. Right? Like, look, guys out there, their culture is not a mystical thing. Right? Yeah. It's not a unicorn, or it's not the end of a rainbow. Trust me, it is a thing that already exists. Yeah. All right, you've just never necessarily taken the time of defining it. If there is distrust between the front and back, that's the culture.
Oh my goodness.
You as a service manager, you're the one that created that. I think I'm gonna get some comments about this one. I'm gonna get a couple people.
But
towards the end of the day, I'm getting a little routed up here. 8th cup of coffee.
You're right on though, and I would love to see the numbers. I don't have the numbers, but I'd love to see the numbers of a shop with a bad culture driven by a bad manager as compared to a good culture with a good manager, and see what the difference in turnover is, employee turnover. Because I think there'd be a big disparity between the two.
Well, there is, and I think what it is for look, I'm not gonna be super angry at service managers for this, because I don't think we've ever actually trained them.
No, I don't think
we've ever trained service managers to understand what a culture is and how to create it, how to identify it. But it's just like I was in a meeting the other day with the service manager, and it was they were having issues, right? Yeah. And it was a front and back issue, very similar. Is that uncommon, front and back issues?
No.
All right. And it's just, I finally, after letting him vent for 20 minutes, I was just like, that's great. What the are you doing about it?
Yeah.
He just like, it was just like, well, no. Look,
back up. Yeah.
You're the head of this team. All right. You're the freaking coach.
Yeah.
Okay. You're the one that's allowing this crap to happen. Okay. So you're going to have to go out there and be the coach. Too often I see service managers just like it's like there's seats. There's like, I think there's tape, like some adhesive. You know what I mean? You know what type of service manager I'm talking about?
I do.
Where there's like it's like this big layer of like sticky shit underneath their ass, and it's like they physically can't like get up out of their seat to actually go. I don't know. Anyways, I digress. I apologize.
Well, but no. What's funny is that you're so spot on. And in terms of the coaching, what we led this conversation off with is that plan for their future, right? And kind of being able to progress them. So if you have somebody that's got a desire to be a manager at some point, and and say they're currently a technician, what are you doing to help groom them up? Because that's one way of gaining trust with somebody is, hey, I do have your best interest in mind. We're eventually going to need a service manager. Now you run into the point to where a service manager, if you get maybe an insecure service manager, it's like, hey, you're just trying to take my job. Rather than the service manager, then it's almost a tiered approach to where, okay, service manager.
I've seen this happen. I've seen this happen.
Yeah, and
look, that's actually my favorite thing. If I sit down with someone and someone looked at me, and this is like, let's say back when I was a general manager, okay?
Yeah.
Someone goes, you know what, Mike, and they're a salesperson I'm interviewing. They're, my goal and objective is I want your job. I'm like, this is great.
Yeah.
Let me tell you what it's going to take to dethrone me. And just like literally assist them in those efforts. I mean, I look, if I try to put myself out of a job, the byproduct of those efforts and what I'm going to get out of those individuals, it's going to be huge, right?
Yeah.
You know what? And look, and the day comes and they actually are prepped and they can take that position. If it's not going to be at my dealership, I'm going to find them a dealership to go work at.
Absolutely. Yes. And that's, you are so spot on. And I think that's where there's a lot of opportunity for general managers in general, or dealer principals even, to say, hey, Mr. Service Manager, it's in your best interest to do this, to groom these guys up, because that's going to help hoist you up. And maybe you become a general manager at some point, or we move you around a little bit, get experience in other parts of the dealership so that you can get elevated to that point. But don't view it as, hey, this guy's gunning for your job. View it as, I'm helping somebody to get better, and in return, that's going to help me leverage my ability to go higher as well. So,
100%. Why would I not want to have all my service advisors gunning for my job?
Right.
I would love to have that, right? I mean, just think that.
Get some fire then.
Well, the other thing too is also just think about how it's a little easier on me, how much pressure it takes off of me, right?
Yeah.
Like if you want to be a service manager, you better start acting like one.
Yeah.
So it allows me to empower them, all right, so that they can learn through experience what it's actually going to require to actually do that. And it's no different. I got a technician that wants to be the foreman. That's cool. Right? What do you see what that guy does?
Yeah.
Do you see how much he assists everyone? How he put his wrenches down to go help anybody in need? Do you see how they just lays down his profitability? Like, this is what I'm talking about. Like, is that the place you really want to be?
Yeah. So that may lead me, like, I have a question for you in that regard. How do you view mentorship programs, like in a dealership?
I think it's a requirement. Like I honestly think it's a requirement. But the only way you can do it successfully is if everybody does have a personal and professional development plan in place.
I agree.
If not, because like I'm thinking like when I first started in the industry, I was a part of a mentorship. Let's face it, for about a month I was someone's bitch. That's what it was. Like, I mean, I just literally whatever the hell this person wanted.
I'm going to do it.
That's like snap their fingers. I'm like, okay, what do you need? What do you need? Okay, what do you want me to do? Okay, I'll run across the lot. I'll go get this. I'll go get this. I'll call this person. You know, it wasn't necessarily mentorship, right?
Well, and it's funny that you lead it that direction because the story that I've got in regard to a mentorship program is one, I completely agree with you. A mentorship program should be a requirement just to even make a new person feel welcome when they come in, right? Like that's a big deal. I have a funny story of going into a dealership, and when I was back on the equipment days, like I went into a dealership and they said they had a mentorship program, and I said, "Oh, that's great. You know, this is good. Who's the mentor for Larry out there?" And they said, "Well, Jim is." And so I go out to Jim. And I said, "Hey, how's this going? How do you like doing the mentorship?" One, Jim wasn't the most personable guy in the world, so it was a little bit. And he was one of those guys that looked at that younger guy that's trying to tell him what to do. And he said, "What mentorship program?" And he didn't even know he was supposed to. He's like, "Oh yeah, they mentioned it to me in passing once that I was his mentor. I just thought it was more like he followed me around and was that bitch, right? Like he was going and doing all the bad work." And it really it kind of rung a bell for me in terms of or brought my attention to the fact that there needs to be some training for the mentor as well. Yes. Right. So there needs to be some
training has to happen from the top down, man.
Absolutely.
Like I'm getting so sick and tired of watching people come in and try to train from the bottom up, and I'm just like, oh God, that's gonna look like that's gonna be a hell of a lot of fun.
It's not,
and it's like no, and then they come back every single 2 weeks and they're surprised that they're retraining on the same. It's just
exactly. And that the similar thing that you said for service managers, right? Is we're putting a mentor in a position that they've got no training on, that they've got no instruction really on what they're supposed to do, or even if it's there's some level of training this person or assisting them when they have a question on something. How is that laid out? And then are they incentivized for doing that? Because I think a lot of times you'll see, and I think dealerships have gotten a lot better at this, right? Like I don't want to downplay.
No. I think there's a percentage. I think there's a percentage of dealerships out there that have gotten a lot better at it. And I think what it is that the culture at some point in time, or a perceive or a perception of what the culture should be, started somewhere. That fire kind of slowly grew throughout the entire dealership and eventually somehow affected the service and parts side.
Yeah.
But when I think of service managers, emphasis on manager.
Yeah.
Right. Think of where most service managers come from.
Yeah.
All right. They were maybe a technician, maybe not. Okay.
Yeah.
They became more normally they started through the path of service advisor, then kind of worked their way to a senior advisor, right? And then they eventually became a service manager. At no point in time did anybody train them actually how to manage anything.
You're so right.
It's just I'm just like it's in their freaking title. Like
you might want to put some training toward them.
Right? Like I mean, how many service managers, and I love working with service managers because I have such a passion for the department. I mean, just simply, also from the profitability perspective, it's like, come on, it's like, I want to spend more time back there and I want to spend time in the front.
Yeah.
The dollars may be up there, but hey, no, profitability's back here.
Yes.
But like spending time with that manager and understanding that, to stop micromanaging people and efforts and manage the process and let the processes manage the people, is a fundamental mind shift in most of these people. They just like, what did you just say?
Well,
you want me to manage their efforts? I'm like, no. I want you to manage the process. Let the process manage their efforts.
And you're spot on. And I think you look at it, and it was probably, they look at how they were managed, which was probably by a manager that had no training in the first place. And so they learned their management style from who came before them.
Exactly.
And you can't fault them for that because there was just no proactive training on it. And again, I think we're moving in the right direction. I think we're getting better, but there is a lot of room for improvement there too. So and for any service manager that's listening, it might be looking for ways, and we talk with a lot of them that say, well, my dealership just does not care about this, and they just treat me like a number. Take the initiative on your own and start reading. And the funny part, I hate to preach this because it would have been nauseating when I was my younger self, but it truly is. What had the greatest impact on my life was that guy back at that semi-trailer dealership that said, hey, you need to start reading about business, right? And you need to start reading about leadership and different things. And I remember the first time I went into a Barnes and Noble, I was probably like 18, which isn't saying much about me. But I went in and I'm like, you go in almost thinking that there's going to be a bunch of fictional books and then like school books, right? Like, and I went in and there was books about cars and racing, and I grew up racing, so I loved that. And then it just kind of hooked me in that I got into that customer service role, and I was like, hey, you know what? I can improve my skills outside of any training that anybody else is going to give me. And I actually listened to a speaker once by the name of John Spence. I don't know if you're familiar with John Spence, but he's a
sounds familiar, but I'm so bad with names. I'm much better.
Hey, I may say here, but he is an author of a book called Awesomely Simple. And
I do know that book. Yes.
Yeah, he's brilliant. But I heard him speak, and one of the things that really hit me was that he said he was talking about the importance of reading and proactive self-development. And one of the pieces that he mentioned was that if you wanted to be better than anybody else, he said, he put out a stat, and he said, I think it was 99.5% of college graduates don't read consistently after college.
Wow.
And so he said,
that doesn't surprise me though.
No, it doesn't, right? Because it makes sense.
I'm actually shocked by that. Yeah.
So if you want to put yourself ahead of 99% of people, he said, read one book per month. And and you will put yourself above 99% of people. And I always kind of took that to heart. And while I don't hit it every month, I really, that's my goal, is to read one book per month. And I truly think that it's had a huge impact on my life. But then it's also to understand, take notes on that book, because what you're reading might not apply to you today, but it could apply to you, 10 years down the road, and you don't even know it yet. So it really is. There's some level of take some initiative. If you're a service manager, parts manager, general manager, whatever you are, a technician, take it upon yourself to develop those soft skills, to really be intentional about it. And there's a lot of there's a lot of good.
That's the key, is intentional. You have to be intentional. Look, it's not just going to organically happen. You're going to love this. I have a dealership I started working with a few years back. And being the dealer principal, we had this kind of love-hate relationship with each other.
I've been there.
I remember we were in there a couple years back talking about personal development. And, just bottom line at the end of the day, he did not want to invest the time into, personally developing and professionally developing on his team.
Sure.
I said, fine. Are you willing to invest the money? And of course, at this point in time, he's just fine. And many times I talk, fine, Jason, I'll give the money, So for his entire management team, I allocated a $2,000 annual budget, all right, for personal and professional development.
Love that.
And I worked with each team member and how they would do it. And some people go to a Tony Robbins, thing. And I had some people that used it to download and pay for audiobooks. And I had some people that signed up for some other local courses and stuff like that. But I pushed each team member to utilize that budget throughout the year. At the end of the 12 months, he came back to me, and I remember he actually unwillingly, really grudgingly wanted to admit it. But he's like, that was probably the best money I spent this entire year. What it did for my team. And I said, look, and he's like, and so then of course the next year it was like, we just had to go farther. And it went from now wanting to invest time and money. So then it really just kind of, just waterfalled over that, just became a much bigger thing. But it has to come from the top down. It's like, we need to get our service managers and our parts managers, and we need to really emphasize on the management. What the hell does that actually mean to manage? I mean, what are they managing? If you ask most service managers, most parts managers, they think they're managing people. That's really what they think they do.
Yeah.
And then how many times have I exited a technician to find out that the reason that they're leaving is because they feel like they're being micromanaged? Holy crap.
You're right. Even the exit interviews, right? Like there's so much value in those too, and understanding and digging deeper, because the one funny thing that I always found in exit interviews is that they would say whatever they could to get out of that as fast as they possibly could, right?
Of course.
The management was fine. It was just a better opportunity. But if there's some way to ask some open-ended questions to try and get them talking and get them comfortable with being able to say, if you're a general manager, of course you don't want to undermine your service manager, right? Like you don't want to just completely throw them under the bus, because it could just be a personality conflict. But really trying to get the good stuff out of it, because and not.
There's so much opportunity in it. There's tons.
Oh my gosh.
So that's actually why for a lot of my dealerships, I don't charge for their service. Maybe I probably should. But if they're a good client of mine, then I will actually offer from a consultant's perspective, right, to come in and exit the individual for them. Now they've already done their portion of the exit. I come in to do just the final interview portion of it. Nice. But you'd be amazed, because I'm not an employee of the dealership.
Yep.
Oh boy. Oh, I get. To your point, you think normally they just want to give you a quick answer and get out of it. Not when I come in. I'm 45 minutes into it and I'm still getting straight. It's like, holy crap.
It's funny when
2 hours later
comes in. Yeah.
Well, but it's cool for me, because then I get to consume it from a consultant's perspective, right? And then take that back to operations. All right. We have to embrace our losses.
Yes.
It's okay to lose. It's just totally okay to lose.
Yeah.
Right? But it's what we do with that loss. All right. It's the education and the time that we take to dissect it that's really the most important part. Sure. Instead, we just say, "Oh, the person it was a bad person. That was a bad." And it was was it? Were they really?
Right.
Were they?
Right.
And
how many times do you see somebody that starts off really good and then fades fast, and they're like, "Well, I don't know what the hell happened." Well, there's a lot that happened there, and if you're not boots on the ground per se, like you can miss that really, really easily. Yeah. Yeah,
huge.
Yeah.
Now
that's interesting.
So that's so cool. We talked about culture. We talked about managing what it actually means. We're managing processes, people, not people. Okay, let the process manage those people.
Yep.
The last thing I'll say about that process, that means you have to document it. You have to have measurable efforts against that. Now, the one thing I love about the fixed ops side of the business is that we measure everything.
Yeah.
I mean, everything is about time. Everything's about it. So it's like we do a really good job. Maybe in the upfront of the dealership, we don't do a good job. All right, but we do. We measure everything. Now, again, we dabbled a little bit on culture today, guys. But I still think that the culture is that byproduct of defining how you want to be perceived by your staff, how you want your clients to perceive you. All right, and move in that direction collectively. That's kind of how culture will ultimately get created. Now, let's talk about if we want to really attract what that next generation is. Look, the next generation of technicians, the next generation of advisors, it's not necessarily money what they're looking for.
Right. Flexibility, right?
They're looking for a lot of different things.
Yeah.
And, I don't think as an industry as a whole quite yet, there's some dealerships that have, but as a whole quite yet, we really haven't quite addressed, what that is and what that looks like. And it's just going to continue to get harder. I think it's always been harder to find good talent.
Yeah.
For this. So when someone says that to you, what do you say?
So one, I still think the number one question we get when we approach a technician about a job is money, right? But it's more of a gatekeeper. Like, okay, I can take care of my car payment and I can take care of my mortgage if I need, whatever you've got.
That's just the expectation.
Yeah, that's the expectation that opens the door to the other things, right? Yeah. And so
now, how am I going to exceed the expectation?
Right, and that's where this is a really loaded question, because that's where you start to get into some of those other flexibility things, and you start to get into some of that having a vision for their future and having the training that goes along with it. I think you're going to start to see a shift to where dealerships might supply tools more often. I think there's a lot.
Dude, I could do a whole podcast on that bullshit. Literally, that industry is like bankrupting some of our best technicians.
They are.
You got guys out there. I mean, I think people that are watching and listening to this that don't know necessarily what we're talking about. But guys, look, a good box, a good toolbox can be the equivalent of a Honda Civic.
Yeah, you're not kidding. Yeah,
and there are these companies out there that will finance these things, and then you got your tools. Like there are guys out there that can be $15,000, $20,000, $25,000, $30,000, $35,000 before they even start working on a car.
Yeah.
And we offer these companies out there offering ridiculously long-term financing with overly done out interest rates.
Oh, yeah.
And it's putting these people in a hole. Like, sorry, I'll digress because I could do a whole podcast on that.
No, I could too. I was super passionate about it, but like the one thing that I always kind of laugh at is we really complain about not enough people entering this industry anymore in terms of technicians.
It's bloody expensive.
Well, not only that, they're typically paid toward the bottom end of the ladder in terms of salaries in a dealership.
Yep.
Their investment is by far the highest to get into the business, and put yourself in their shoes, right? Like why doesn't a salesperson have to buy their own laptop then, or why doesn't there's so many.
No, that's totally true. Actually, I was in a lunchroom the other day at the dealership, and just in between meetings, and I watched these salespeople. They're complaining. So here in Canada, we have this. Where we are in Ontario, we have this thing called ONVIC. So we actually have to pay for license for the right to sell cars.
Okay.
Don't get me started. I can do a podcast on that. That was an awkward thing when I moved to Canada. I was like, I'm sorry. You want me to take a test? I need a card, like a membership card to sell cars. I'm like, I've been doing this for a while. You sure? Like, anyway, what do you do? So the salesperson was complaining that he had to like renew his for like $250 or something like that. And one of the technicians at the next table just started kind of giggling a little bit. I'm just like, and I knew why he was laughing because he's like, are you fucking kidding me? You're complaining about a $250 membership fee? Like,
yeah. It's nuts though, and I go back to what I invested in my tools, even as a failed technician in my early days, and I look at it and I'm like, oh my goodness, like
how much was it back then? How I'm curious. Like, what did you have in it?
So my dad would not let me buy a nice box, so I bought a used Craftsman box, and it was fairly a decent size, right? It was a roller that was I don't know, a decent size, but nothing expensive whatsoever, and wanted me to make sure I had tools, right? So then as a young tech, sometimes you do stupid stuff like buy, a $90 screwdriver set or do stuff like where, well, you get
that Mac tool truck pulls up and you're like, oh shit, that is shiny.
Yeah. That's like Christmas just rolls up to your shop every week, and
it is.
You got to pay for it. The tool companies do a really good job of marketing that. That's their job.
Yes, they do.
But I, as far as a dollar amount of what I had invested, gosh, I don't know, probably anywhere from $6,000 to $8,000 to start.
And that was some time ago. I don't even know the stat.
Yeah.
What do you think the average technician now today is in it?
Oh my gosh. So I'm a little too familiar with this now because last week, now this was an independent shop in northern Wisconsin.
Okay.
But it burned to the ground, right? And so I went and the local Snap-on dealer, who's a friend of mine, called me and said, hey, would you mind coming up and talking to these guys, maybe helping them get their resumes up to date and all that fun stuff, and just seeing what we could offer for support. So I drove up. It's about a 3-hour drive. Drove up. We we put together a meeting in a Holiday Inn conference room. And we sat there, and I sat there with 7 techs who just lost all of their toolboxes, and the shop didn't have great insurance on them. So they're talking. They lost, some of these techs lost upward of $50,000-$60,000 worth of tools.
Jeez.
And they had, I think they each got $1,000 worth of insurance back. So you of those, the ones that were the most concerning were that there was 3 younger techs, and when I say younger, they were probably 23, 24 years old, really good techs. And they just, one of them had still, $8,000 or $9,000 that they owed to Snap-on yet.
Yeah.
And that's gone. And so one of the first questions that the Snap-on guy that I was with asked the group, he said, first off, how many of you want to remain technicians? Because you just lost your ability to work on stuff, right?
Yeah.
And to their credit, they all still wanted to do it. They all still wanted to be in the business. But I mean, it just even that, they've got to have insurance. Like the expectation is that the technician carries insurance on those tools. So they didn't even think to ask the question that they wouldn't be covered under the shop's policy.
Yep.
They weren't. And they're going through a tough time right now because of it. So in talking about benefits, that's one thing that I would highly encourage dealerships to do is look into tool insurance for their guys, because I think honestly it's the right thing to do.
And it's not crazy. Like, yeah, I've seen. I talked to someone a couple months back about it, and the prices that he kind of threw at me, I was like, that's not. You know what? That's reasonable.
Oh,
I didn't think it was crazy.
For what they bring to the table, and if you're sitting down in an interview, and let's face it, technicians have leverage over dealerships right now, right? Like there's not enough of those guys to go around right now.
Well, so, you know what? I find we should talk a little bit about why that's the case.
Yeah.
And you were we talked a little bit about culture before.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the biggest reasons why technicians have something over to the dealerships right now.
Yeah.
Is because there's a total lack of culture. Like there's just like there's no, like, if a dealership, and I've actually seen this, I got two I can think off the top of my head. I wish I could give you a bigger number, but that's about two I can only think of.
Yeah.
But I mean, they actually have a list of technicians that want to come work at this place, and word gets out. Like, the technicians there are happy, they're excited, they're energetic. It's just a great team environment. And word got out, and it's to the point now where, like, this dealership is kind of over indebted and trying to maybe kind of push some of these people onto some of the other dealerships in the area.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so there are ways
to get
to that point. Yes, 100%.
There's a reason for that, because they were intentional about it, and they, I had a consultant tell me once that everything's just a math problem when it comes down to it. Like, I said, so if I'm a dealership right now, I do a math problem in terms of I pencil out what would it take me to be above average in pay for everything, right? Like, and it's easy to look at like a 2008 and say, oh my gosh, if we ever get back into that again and we have high overhead, like what are we going to do? But I think there's a true opportunity there for dealerships that if they really put a pen to paper and they look at it and they say, okay, we're going to pay above average. This is what the additional costs that we're going to have by doing that. And then, some of the other benefits, such as flexibility or a different schedule or tool insurance, right? Mm-hmm. If you looked at that and then looked at if you were able to decrease your level of attrition, right? So the amount of people that are leaving your dealership.
Yep.
And that in turn caused you to spend less money on recruiters like my company, or just in general, like ads on Indeed are not cheap. Ads on any major job board are not cheap. If you turn your dealership into that person that's having to push techs away, guess what? You kind of turn the tables in terms of who you can bring in. You don't end up desperate for people. You can hire based on culture and have people fit. And I think it's a great way of doing business.
I'm not a hunter by any means, right? Yeah. But some of my family members are, and I have one cousin who's an amazing bow hunter, and that real champion level type stuff, right?
Yeah.
The smartest hunters out there don't chase game; they get the game to come to them.
Yeah.
And I'm always kind of it's always made sense for me from a business perspective, right? Like, and I find, I actually see a kind of a trait there, or a consistent pattern, right? With really well done organizations and businesses.
Yeah.
They don't have to go pursue. Right. All right. The game's coming to them.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's just how much time is wasted in acquisition.
Yeah.
When it's like we can focus more of our efforts on retention to the point where our retention is so good, people want to come.
Bingo, bingo, bingo. And for those dealerships that have HR managers, right, or have a human resources department, I think we too often get stuck in the checking the box to go on to the next thing, right? And like it stems from like a corporate environment, and I've talked to a lot of people about this. But what if part of that HR role is to make our dealership a more desirable place to work in general, right? And
Sure.
that's an objective where it's a big long-term objective. But then the other piece, and this is something I preach constantly, is that I talk to dealerships and they'll say, well, we have the best management around and we have all this blah, 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 blah. And I always laugh because I'm like, it's normally the manager saying that. Like, it's normally the manager saying they have the best management around. So
yeah, that's true.
Our industry has a really tough time at looking in the mirror and understanding maybe what our weaknesses are and trying to improve them. And so there's probably a lot of people that won't like that I say that either. But it's something I have to take as a business owner myself and say, are we offering the best of what we can to our people? And one thing, going back to the caring about the people, and this isn't just technicians, this is in general, and this is what I do with my staff here, and I think it works really, really well, is I've been in jobs before where I was terrified to say I had plans other than where I was working, right? Like I had objectives to go higher, and I was terrified that if I would have said something to management that I would have got fired on the spot, right? And that includes some pretty high roles. And so what I encourage in my business, which is not a shop, is that, hey, if you have aspirations that are different than what they are here at Find a Wrench, tell me, because I'll help you get there. And I've got a young lady that works for me that is in sales, and she's a rock star. She's really, really good. And she is going to school. She graduated from UW-Madison in 3 years, just incredibly bright. And she has aspirations to be a professor at some point of business. And I said, there's not a better way to learn business than what you're doing right now, which is cold calling and starting to grow your business. And think about how you'll be able to teach some of these people someday. And so you'll be able to teach from experience rather than a book, which is really, really helpful in those scenarios. So, but just showing that you care about them enough to want them to do better and want them to be bigger than what they currently are, I think goes a long ways.
It does. And you know what? It promotes what we kind of started off in the beginning talking about, culture. You know what? I think we brought some serious knowledge today, and honestly, I think we touched on 2 or 3 topics, which I think we could literally go off and do a whole nother podcast on. But I know that's our time for today. Yeah. Jay, thank you so much, man, for taking the time to jam with me. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I love this. This was. I learned a lot during this podcast too. I could listen to you all day too. So it really is. It's cool to get passionate people together, that are passionate about this business, and I think passionate about getting, maybe I learned something along the way that I can kind of spread to other people, and hopefully that's the case today. I really enjoyed this,
and that's what we're doing. I mean, look, if one person, right, gets some level of value from this and turns it into an actionable, executionable effort, all right, and makes a difference, it's worth every single thing. It's worth all the time we put into it. Hey, for everybody who's listening and watching and would love to connect with you, Jay, and learn more about your company and more about you and more about what you guys are doing, what is the best way to do so?
Of course, you can start off at finderwrench.com. We've got some cool tools out there that you're more than welcome to check out, including the ability to post jobs for free, right? So if you just want to get transparency to your jobs, there's a really good opportunity to do that. It also explains some of our other services. We have a subscription-based service and a traditional headhunting service. But then for me personally, follow me on LinkedIn or connect with me on LinkedIn. It's amazing how powerful that's become as a tool to interact with others in our industry, again, that are passionate about the business. But those are probably the 2 primary ones. And you can call in, and we've got the number posted on the website. Feel free to call in. I'm an open book, so I'll talk to anybody at anytime I can. So, but yeah, I think those are the two easiest ways to get in touch with us.
Awesome. Hey, Jay, thank you again so much for your time today. This was an absolute blast. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you.
Have yourself a good one.
You too.
We covered a bunch of great topics today. What stood out most to you? Be sure to let us know in the comments section below. And don't forget to like the post and share it to keep the conversation going. You can follow Jason on all social media platforms by following Strategy with Jason. You can find him pretty well everywhere you can share content. I hope we were able to get you thinking. And until the next time, have a great day.